Hello, thanks for tuning in. This is the first virtual edition of the Nature and Music series, and my name is Blaine Todd, Associate Director for Other Minds. Tonight we're joined by interspecies music pioneer Jim Nollman, coming to us live from San Juan Island in Washington State, and he's going to be joined in conversation by Charles Amirkhanian, Executive and Artistic Director for Other Minds. I'd like to encourage everybody to visit otherminds.org, where you can check out our various programs as well as watch videos and listen to audio samples documenting our 2 decades of existence. And in fact, you'll be able to keep a finger on the pulse of a series of virtual events that'll be coming out from us, including more installments of the Nature and Music. You can also catch us on the air. We have a radio program called Music from Other Minds, and That's broadcast every Friday night from 10 p.m. until midnight on KALW. You can find them online, kalw.org, or if you're here in the Bay Area, you can go to 91.7 FM on your FM radio. Also, Other Minds Records, very active right now. We have a number of great releases coming forth, one of which is Bill Fontana's Landscape Sculpture with Foghorns, coming out tomorrow, December 4th, actually. The record features something like 50 plus foghorns from around the Bay Area, all of which are being telescoped together. And there's also a concert version from 1981 on here featuring Stuart Dempster on trombone, didgeridoo, garden hose, and conch shell. It's honestly fascinating, so please check it out. And in fact, we're in the middle of a fundraising drive. If you go to otherminds.org/donate, donate any amount, $1 or $100, whatever you're able and willing to do, we'll send this CD to your home for free. Well, free with a donation. It's our little token of gratitude. I'm sure that this conversation is going to go to a number of different interesting places. A lot of topics I'm sure will be covered, and that will raise a lot of questions for you. And I'd encourage you to ask questions by using the comment panel in your web browser, and we will let you know when to do so. It'll be towards the end of the event. Thank you again for joining us. This should be a very special evening with Jim. And we're very glad you're here. And please stay tuned for more virtual events in the future. Now here's Charles Amirkhanian.
What really is the nature of music? We at Other Minds regard it as an open-ended question, and that anything audible by the human ear might be fair game for composers and performers to employ in their work. Today, we're going to be speaking with one of the most interesting and inspiring composers to take our challenge to define the nature of music literally. He has devoted his life to making music out in nature with non-human performers, a practice he calls interspecies music. Jim Nollman is the artist in question, and we are pleased to visit with him to find out what he's learned and accomplished over nearly 50 years now, as he's performed with turkeys, wolves, orca whales, and other inhabitants of the animal queendom. Jim, welcome. And would you begin by telling us where you are at the moment?
Yes. Hi, Charles. Nice to talk to you. I'm on San Juan Island, Washington, in the far northwest corner of the United States, and I'm sitting in my studio.
And I understand you have a garden.
I have a very large garden. We try to grow as much of our food as we can, and this year, probably because of COVID, we've decided to even try to do it in the winter, which is quite challenging and a lot of fun.
I was kind of intrigued with the heirloom squashes. what
Oh
are
yeah,
they?
they have great names. My favorite this year is called Galou. It's a French squash. It's pink and it has warts all over it. The more warts, the better, they say, because the warts are the result of some sugar chemistry that's going on inside the squash.
Well, it sounds like you're having too much fun with your meals, but now's a good time to do it.
Yeah.
Jim, you were born in Boston in 1947. You studied English and theater at Tufts University, graduating in 1969, and then you traveled abroad and landed in Berkeley, in San Francisco, around 1972, 73. I was music director at Berkeley's KPFA radio at the time, and I remember you walking into my office to propose something quite unexpected. Can you say what that was?
Yeah, I had been in southern Mexico and I'd bought a bunch of these black clay flutes and saxophone instruments. And I was practicing it one day when the turkey that the woman next door was fattening up for a dinner started answering my calls, and I soon found that I could ride that sound. It was a combination of my volume and the frequencies of the notes would get the turkey to do this quite exact uh, gobble. And I thought this should be on the radio for Thanksgiving. And you were known even then as a willing to try anything. And I was performing some John Cage and doing very strange music myself. And we seemed like copacetic beings. And you decided to send me to a turkey farm and make a KPFA Thanksgiving Day turkey song and music to eat Thanksgiving dinner by. And, you know, I was pretty young. I was 24, 25 years old. And I kind of had a hit. And I had always had aspirations to play rock and roll, but never liked playing in clubs. And I had a problem as a professional musician. And suddenly I had a hit playing music with an animal, and it seemed like I got to do more of this. This is what I want to be doing.
The world was telling you something.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember that when we broadcast Turkey Song, which we're going to hear in a portion of in a second, that we had a lot of response, and that the following year we repeated it, and it became a kind of tradition on KPFA every year as a kind of statement. What is the statement that Turkey Song makes, other than the obvious musical qualities?
I always thought of it as a light piece and a piece of that got people laughing. Just the idea that anybody would do this, and the fact that I actually did TV work doing this. I worked for 2 different TV shows that sent me to a turkey farm to do it again, and I got better at it. And I would say that it was the improbability of it, and the fact that it worked, and everybody knows turkeys, and this was a new side to them.
It also made you feel a little guilty when you sat down to dinner because we
You know,
played it.
I've actually raised turkeys, so yeah, there's that side of it too. It's been played on NPR quite a bit, and it was the first thing I did, and it kind of sealed my career.
I have to say, though, we've had an invasion of wild turkeys around the Bay Area, and there's no love lost between turkeys and humans out here. Today, I was driving down a very busy street, and about 6 of them walked across in front of traffic, and everybody politely stopped and let them walk, but they're kind of slow and deliberate about it, and it was an in-your-face moment for the turkey side. The music that we're going to hear was what you recorded in Petaluma, is that right?
That's right. Yes.
And Petaluma is a city north of San Francisco, about 40 minutes by car. And the sounds that we're going to hear were performed. This is not overdubbed. It sounds like an Ornette Coleman Fantasia because there's so many voices going at once that you can't imagine that that this was not overdubbed. But you're performing with a woman named Sybil, who was a cellist, you say.
Yes,
And
she was a cellist.
what was
Yes.
she playing?
Well, we were both playing all sorts of whistles and flutes and uh, pottery, saxophones, slide whistles, kazoos, and anything went. And it wasn't overdubbed because I don't think anybody had the ability to do that at the time. I remember you giving me a Nagra for the day, and I was flabbergasted to have access to such a piece of hardware. And I think that was the extent of it.
Well, at least we got a good sound. Let's listen to an excerpt from Turkey Song by Jim Nollman.
bread and cheese upon the shelf, uh-huh. There is bread and cheese upon the shelf, uh-huh. There is bread and cheese upon the shelf. If you want some more, you have to find it yourself, uh-huh.
One of the greatest hits of 1973, Turkey Song by Jim Nollman, excerpted here, but it was heard in its entirety just last Friday night on Music from Other Minds, hosted by Liam Herb. And it was a really, really exciting trajectory that the music takes over the, what was it, 30 minutes or so, I think. If
That's
anybody remembers the name, the surname of Sybil, who was one of the players there, would you text it to us so we could find out? You know, you can, during this live transmission, which is happening here on December 3rd, 2020, you can submit comments and questions at the comment section of your browser, whatever you're using. So feel free to do that. And Jim, did this ever get released as a commercial recording, or what happened to it?
It was picked up by Folkways Record, along with some of my music with Orcas and Wolves, and it was cut in two. There were two parts to it. One was what you're hearing now, and there was a folk song that was Froggy Went a Courtin'. And ever after, going back 40 years now, it was played every so often, and somebody would send me a little message, and it was always the folk song that was played. So the excerpt we just heard, I really haven't heard in 40 years, and I had completely forgotten about it. It was then, Folkway was when Moses Ash died, who was the main man at Folkways. The music is now in the Smithsonian, and it's been re-released as a part of a folk compendium anthology with music by Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, and people like that, as a album of folk children's songs, and that's where it's had its best-selling format ever since.
Well, this was 1973. You came by and proposed this project, and then subsequently, due to the success of this particular piece, you ended up having a career working with music with animals, and it went on and on and on. And the Navy hired you to be a whale whisperer at one point. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
About the whale whispering, about how it went on and on and on, because I'll start with the on and on and on. I was willing to try anything, and I had very strong limitations as a performing musician. So when I did it with Wolves, and then I got my first grant from Project Jonah. I had moved to a little town north of San Francisco called Bolinas by then. And the woman who ran Project Jonah gave me my first grant to go play music with dolphins. And for dolphins, I invented a few instruments that would let me go out in the water and actually float inside them, these drums. And that led to a Whole Earth catalog and the Coevolution Quarterly, which was another neighbor of mine, Peter Warshaw, to write an article about playing music with wolves and dolphins. And that led to Greenpeace calling me and asking me if I would like to join them to do a media event on one of the dolphin drive fisheries in Japan. And I'm going to stop there, because this kind of progress and process went on and on and on. Every time I would finish something, there would be something else to do it. At one point, I met some people who were philanthropists, and they basically said, we want you to continue doing this as long as you're producing. I started a nonprofit, because to have patrons in the United States, you have to have tax deduction capability. And that went on for, my nonprofit existed for almost 35 years. And now I'm going to get to the Navy part of it. I was feeling that I was through doing it. I didn't want to do it anymore when I was in my early 60s. And just when that happened, like everything else in my life, somebody came forward and gave me a new job. And that was, at that time, I was doing underwater concerts using all these collected sounds from, I'm talking maybe 50 different kinds of animals, and formatting them into techno or whatever it was called at the time, and having audiences go into the swimming pool, and the sound, they would have to dunk their heads in the water to hear it. And, you know, I'm talking lobsters and many kinds of fish and several kinds of whales and seals and walrus. And there was a guy that came to one of my concerts who was starting up a program trying to get the Navy to solve the problem of killing whales when they were doing their sonar exercises. And I was a breath of fresh air for him, because I told him I thought they could solve it in 5 minutes. And this was this was turning into one of the biggest scandals that the Navy had ever encountered. And they never actually did what I said, which was simply to turn up the dial more slowly, because the whales were doing what I called a vertical stampede. They were diving really deep, 3,000-4,000 feet down, and these hugely noisy sonars would start, and they would stampede like a buffalo in the thunderstorm straight up to the surface to breathe, which was where their survival was. And they would get the bends, and then they would die. And so I got hired by him because I had more firsthand knowledge of many different whale animals and how they were vocalizing and why they were vocalizing. And I worked for the Navy for 7 years, and I thought of my own role as being the ombudsman for a group of mostly PhD acousticians, marine biologists, and submarine commanders. And it was a role I took seriously and really enjoyed it. And when it was over, which was, I guess, 6 years now, I retired, which doesn't really mean anything for an artist, as you well know. But I didn't. My nonprofit was no longer functioning, and I just do what I want to do now, which is write.
Well,
and yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Did the Navy actually decide to turn the volume up slowly on those sonars so that they
Oh
wouldn't?
man, don't get me started on that. No, they would never do that, because that meant that they would have to change what they were doing. And what they were doing was more important to them, even though it was just an exercise. This was a test. They would not change anything, because the security of the United States, that was always their rationale, was on the line. And of course it wasn't. There was no point to them just turning this stuff on at full volume. And when I'm talking full volume, if it happened while you or I were 50 feet from it, we would be deaf. And that's how loud it was. And they're still doing it. And it's a syndrome, you know, of sound becoming a weapon of mass destruction. And the militaries of the world are not willing to take that as seriously as they should, I think. Sound is not thought of as pollution by a lot of people. And that was what I had to contend with. And I dealt with it.
You could knock a building down with low frequencies at a high enough volume. So
yeah, the example I like is the French during World War I developed a giant whistle that that they could direct air into it, and it would kill soldiers on the opposite line, but it would kill anything on their side of the line too. So it never got used in combat.
We're going to watch a video that was done, I don't know when exactly, of you playing guitar with orcas. How are they hearing you?
I had a boat with right, left, front, and back of the boat on the two sides were twin hydrophones, and on the front and the back were underwater speakers. The hydrophones are underwater microphones. And the problem I always had, just logistically, is that the whales could have been a mile away. And the sound in the water travels really fast, and it's clear, but the sound, because my speakers were so close to my hydrophones, I had to not play as loud as I wanted to, or I'd blare myself out. I wouldn't be able to hear myself. And anyway, that was a logistical issue. In the case, I think of the one you're going to play, the whales were, I was being filmed by National Geographic, and I didn't discover the whales' relationship to what I was playing really clearly until I got home and played the tapes. So yeah, let's hear it.
Rather than trying to figure out if whales have language, I already know they have a language, and I'm there to enhance that and kind of bring that to a human culture. My rusty green cord. Plug in the underwater speaker. Underwater speaker walks off the end of the dock. This is a hydrophone, and it's basically an underwater microphone. So now they're on to us. You can hear the echolocating, very focused on the boat. An Orca's signature whistle is kind of like a little guitar riff, a little hook. So the trick is to play when they're not vocalizing, and then stop before they vocalize, and not play anything when they're vocalizing. So then you get the sense of the dialogue going on. When they establish that and sound that, I like to bring it up a half a tone if I can lock onto it, and to see if they'll come with me, because if they come, now they're really in my ears. Okay, I'm gonna play. Music is a language. I'm not trying to solve mystery. I'm there to celebrate it.
That was Jim Nollman as a young man out there with the orcas. Does that bring back memories to see yourself on that boat?
Yeah, I did that for a long time, and that was a lot of fun. What can I say? It was great to be doing that. And when the orcas would respond, sometimes I would change my key. I'd go up a half a note from what they were doing, because I wanted to know if they were going to interact with me. I wasn't interested in just playing sounds while they were playing. I wanted to try to explore the idea of whether they were listening or not. So if I went up a half a note and then they came up a half a note, half a tone, I knew that they were listening, and that was the whole thing. And that, to do that kind of stuff, most musicians wouldn't be that interested in, because it took so much patience. It was more, I had to do it for years, and I might get for 60 hours of recording and trying it, I might get 5 minutes of something new. And I was having such a good time. There was no problem for me to do that, but I was just in the spot of being able to do that. And a lot of the work I do, I was the guy able to do it. And I'm so thankful for that today.
You played bottleneck guitar with orcas too. We're going to have an example of that. You want to tell us a little bit about why you chose that instrument?
Well, the instrument was made for me to play music with orcas. It's actually been featured in Guitar Player magazine. It was made by a guy in Phil Cacopardo, at the time, I've been out of touch with him for years. He just called me up one day and said, "I'd like to participate in this music you're doing with orcas, and I'd like to make a guitar for you." And I said, "Well, I don't know." And he said, "Well, it's going to be my gift, and I'd like to participate on that level." And it was a beautiful guitar, as you can see. And anyway, the thing that was interesting about the Bottleneck session is that it was part of this filming with National Geographic, of which you just saw an excerpt. But I didn't really know it was there at all because, as I say, the orcas could be far away and not very loud, and my guitar was always loud because it was 20 feet from my speakers. So they never used that in their film because I didn't discover this incredible interaction that happened until I got home and started playing with the volume levels, boosting up the wails. And the other thing that was going on in this, and this is really interesting to me, is there was a lot of boat noise, a lot of water noise. The boat was bobbing up and down, and the cables from the hydrophone were banging against the deck. So they couldn't use it because of that as well. And so I decided just to loop all the noise and take one part of it and try to get rid of the rest of it. So I made a kind of a rhythmical loop, which is not artificial. It was all happening at the time, but it's why National Geographic rejected it. And so it became an important part of the piece. And let's listen to it because it's really one of the best interactions I ever had from a musical point of view.
You're listening to music by Jim Nollman. That's called Bottleneck Orca, and it is what it says it is. and it's hard to believe, but Jim Nollman, who's our guest today on The Nature of Music, sponsored by Other Minds here, is a person who has really come to grips with some issues in music that are not often tackled by artists. And in the course of doing this, Jim, you've been featured on NHK Tokyo, ABC television. You worked for a bit with Priscilla Presley, Diane Sawyer. What's this all about? How come you get to do this and all the other avant-garde composers who are really famous don't make the cut?
It's because I was a geek. I was what I was doing was not art, even though I'm an artist. It was the act of itself. It was the physical act, not the sound of it. And I got to do it. You know, I've always thought of that. Sometimes I would feel I got a short shrift of the thing just because of the way they treated what I was doing, but I got to do it nonetheless. And I never minded doing it, but yeah, sure, you're absolutely right. There was, I was playing music with animals. That was kind of like the guy who goes into the snake pit and puts rattlesnakes in their mouth, you know? And I got all that. Yeah, I understood that's why I got to do it. But at some point, I stopped being invited. And I don't know why that happened, but maybe I had my 15 minutes and that was the end of it.
Well, it's still going, fortunately, for our sake. And I'd like to mention to people watching and listening, if you're doing this on December 3rd, 2020, and we're live, please submit a question or a comment through the comment section on whatever program you're using. And thank you for joining us. I'm Charles Amirkhanian, artistic director of Other Minds, and it's our pleasure to continue this series that started at the David Brower Center, which is a wonderful building in Berkeley that houses 14 to 18 different for-profit and nonprofits who are involved in environmental issues. Other Minds maintains an office there as well, and as part of our participation with these other wonderful organizations, we have decided to launch in the theater downstairs in the lobby a series of programs called The Nature of Music, in which we examine music that's composed by individuals who are interested in ambient sounds, natural sounds, and who have somehow brought the world into the concert hall. And Jim Nollman is perhaps one of the most interesting examples of this kind of work. Jim, thank you for doing this. It's been a long time since we've seen each other. I saw you in the 70s, and then now we've found you up in Friday Harbor, Washington. My goodness, this is quite a reunion.
It is a reunion.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be talking to you again, Charles. It brings back a lot of memories, and you were at the beginning for me, and I appreciate all you did.
I have a question for you. I know that you didn't start out to be a composer particularly, but what was the path by which you arrived here? Did you start writing music for particular events? Did you have an instrument that you had practiced with your whole life? What's the story?
I started doing music for theater in college and really liked doing ambient music and music that had other purposes besides being performed with nothing else happening around it. And I always knew I was going to be a musician, and in the beginning, I hadn't figured out exactly how I could make a living doing this. And I played rock and roll for a couple of years in Bolinas. These days, I've played in Contra dance bands, and I love playing traditional American music, everything from
Hmm.
rags to Appalachian stuff. But no, I don't read music. I've never put any notes on paper. Um, I really know how to use Pro Tools and the entire recording studio stuff, and all the samplers. I've taught myself how to do that. And a lot of the music that I've been doing for the past 10 years is almost exclusively done on that. In my elderhood, in my seniority, I've learned how to play the mandolin pretty well. I can hold my own with just about anybody. And but no, I've never thought of myself as a composer, quite honestly. And I'll take that role. It's a good one. I think
Well, it's
that's
interesting in a way. You came up at a time when music was evolving because of influences from the visual arts field, from
yeah,
Fluxus, for example, where
yeah,
performance art and happenings had sonic components. And so people who didn't think of themselves as composers suddenly were dealing with sound in a new way. You had the conceptual artists who dealt with sound in a different way as well. So,
yeah.
uh, and a big change happened in the early 70s when we had portable cassette machines that had pretty good sound quality, and you could go out into the environment and tape sounds and incorporate them into your music. So everybody was thinking a little differently that way. And conservatory training wasn't necessarily going to direct you into innovating in that way, because if you had those other skills, you wanted to put them to use. So sometimes limitations give you an explosion of creativity that you'd never have thought of otherwise. But here you are ending up as a kind of folk music aficionado and specialist. And
Hmm.
do you perform today where you live in the San Juan Islands in Washington?
I perform for a farmer's market, and I perform for Contra dances, and I almost nothing. But thinking again about the whole composer community, I've always felt when people ask me what I do, and from an art point of view, and just as often I get asked what I do from an environmental point of view, or from a media point of view. I've thought of myself as a conceptual artist and a performance artist. I mean, when I'm performing, I'll give you one example. I did some performances in Japan where I went on tour to several places in Japan where whaling had happened for years, and there were no more whales. And the people who owned the whaling companies wanted to transform into whale watching, which really didn't mean whale watching because there were no whales, but there always were dolphins. And dolphins are just as good as whales if you're a whale watcher. And so they put me on tour with some Japanese movie stars, and we would go on a boat and I would play music trying to attract them. And what I was really doing was attracting 30 or 40 TV networks, radio TV stations, to come out and film me doing this, sitting beside a well-known soap opera movie star. And that's how whale watching started in Japan. So, the art I do, it's not so much composition as it's more like nature art. I was really at the beginning of that. I think Smithson in Salt Lake, he's the only one I know of that had done anything like that. And now there's a lot of people doing it. It's kind of the happening thing. So I think I was kind of there at the beginning of that. And that's more my community than the classical. My background is not classical composition. I don't know how to read music. I've never done that. It's always been sound as it comes into my ear rather than as it comes into my hand.
Are there well, the fact that you don't read music is interesting, but what you do read is whales and kangaroo rats and all sorts of things that we can't read. You probably discovered that there are certain ways of interacting with different species to stimulate them to respond to you sonically. What are some of the what's a strategy for a kangaroo rat, for example?
Okay, I had this idea that kangaroo rats make these very elaborate burrows and they thump, they come out at night. So this is a nighttime activity. You don't do anything with a kangaroo rat during the day. The first thing you have to do to get there is to think like a kangaroo rat, that this is really a kangaroo rat. This is not a drummer in a kangaroo rat's body. This is really a kangaroo rat. And what does that mean? And so I'd have to kind of really stretch myself to get there, especially with, it's much easier with dolphins and orcas than it is with kangaroo rats. Okay, so it's interesting you chose that because that's about as outside as I've ever traveled with that. They thump, and because they're on this very elaborate burrow with different depths of soil and holes underneath it, it's tuned. And the tuning of it, who knows, maybe some scientist has been out there for years and can tell you that if they stand at the 12 o'clock place on the burrow or full north, it's going to be a certain note. I seriously doubt that's true, but that's kind of the thought that would go through my mind. You know, maybe this is a master drummer, and that's the way I went in working with kangaroo rats. And the other thing is, I might be out there for 4 hours and get, as I say, 5 minutes of anything that's usable, you know, to put on your radio show, for example. And that was great. I didn't mind doing that because I love being out in the wild. You know, that's a home run for me.
Are you a backpacker?
Yeah, sure. To be able to go out into the wild or out on the water to play music, it's great. Yeah.
We're talking with Jim Nollman, and Jim, I wanted to move on to your counterdance music. That we have an example of a recording you made on the tune "Kitchen Girl." First of all, what is the tune, and what is being said in the tune, and then how did you handle it here?
Kitchen Girl is played for contra dances. You know, it's part of the genre, and that means is an A part and a B part. And to play a contra dance, you play the A twice, and then you play the B twice. In every contra dance tune is going to have 16 bars for the A part and 16 bars for the B part. Very simple music. And I was, you know, I've already been talking about my background in deconstruction and being able to think like a kangaroo rat. So this music is fun to play it, but to record it, I would never want to record it just straight. I mean, there's a million recordings. Go on YouTube and do a search on Kitchen Girl, and you're going to find basically the same tune played by 10 different, or I don't know, maybe 100 different people. So I wanted to take it apart, and that meant calling in a great jazz guitar player and a rhythm and blues bass player, and adding sounds of walrus and bearded seals. Wait till you hear the bearded seal. And that, for all you people watching us, you have to wait till the very end. The bearded seal does this thing. It's as close to a spiral staircase as you're ever going to hear sonically. And it's like walking down the staircase and getting dizzy doing it. And that's the sound that bearded seals make right now. If you were in the Arctic, they'd be making those sounds, and they're uncanny. It sounds like a sound from Mars. You know,
I can't wait. Let's hear it.
Yeah, okay.
Well, that proves you can play music, Jim Nollman. This is a version of Kitchen Girl by Jim. And I guess I should ask you, do you have any recordings available? And if so, how does anybody obtain one?
I have a few recordings. I have Orca's Greatest Hits, which was published by my nonprofit, Interspecies. I have.
How do you get that? How do you get that?
I don't know how you can't get it anymore. I used to sell it. I sold probably 3,000 of them over 20 years from my house, and without just going to conferences and things. Then there's I did this recording of traditional music, of which Kitchen Girl is a part, is published by Red Newt from Portland, Oregon. And I'm thinking in the future, I might do another one of these. I've got a much better handle on how to, and I know a lot more tunes now, and I might do in the future. So you can get that any place where music can be bought. And you can listen to any of these tunes on Spotify and all the usual places.
We have a question from Harry Bernstein and Karen McGreblian. You indicated the orcas respond to pitch. Do they respond to other dimensions of music as well, like volume and rhythm?
We found that they like simple and strong syncopated rhythms. Reggae music was always successful with them, but you know, over the years, we would invite lots of musicians to come out and try it. Basically, if you were a member of Interspecies, my organization at the time, we would put out a call every year that if you have something you want to say to the orcas, let us know what it is, and if we like it, we'll invite you to come out on our boat for a week, which was basically a recording studio on the water in a little cove in a remote part of British Columbia, near Vancouver Island. And the thing, over the years, we had classical musicians, we had Grammy winners, we had rock and roll musicians, every kind of music you can imagine. And the thing that the whales like the best is if the musicians were having a good time. And I don't know what that means. Yeah, I don't know how that's just about everybody that we worked with felt that way. If it was flowing and relaxed and in a groove, the groove is a real thing. And the whales, they got it. They felt it. They knew it. And the other thing that was interesting, it wasn't the whales. After we'd been there in this boat in the same place for about 3 or 4 years, we realized that it was only 2 of the whales out of 80 in the area who were at all interested in us. And they were a mother and her son. And
how did you know that?
Because you can identify the whales from their dorsal fins. And all those whales up there were being watched all the time. And the whale that was most friendly to us was friendly to all the researchers up there as well. And her son seemed to be the one who was mostly vocalizing. And the mother was in her 30s, and the son was about 16 or 18 years old when we were there. And one year we got up there, and the mother had died, natural causes, and the son never came back. And we never had I mean, they used to come every night from sometime between 9 and 11 o'clock at night. And when the mother died, none of the other whales were that interested in us, and we ended the project.
Did they have names?
They named the whales by their numbers. This was A pod, which is, they're in these family groups, and this family group was A, and the mother's name was A2. But she was so friendly with the researchers that they gave her the name of Nicola because she had a nick out of her fin. And the son, I never heard him called anything but A6. And I haven't been up there in years, so I should have a reunion. I really thought of the whales as part of our band. These two whales were phenomenal with us. They were great.
You mentioned you lived in Bolinas, and Blaine Todd of our staff said he would be curious to hear about the kind of zeitgeist of the community. What was it like living in Bolinas in the 70s?
Bolinas was the center of the universe. It was a hot spot. There was artists and I don't even know how to begin with that. There was so much creativity going there. It was an artist community. And one thing you could do in Bolinas, nobody could own property, but you could live there almost for free for a time of it. And you'd walk downtown in the morning, and there'd be poets, and there'd be musicians, and there'd be fine artists, and there'd be people writing. The Whole Earth catalog was happening from there, and New Age magazine, one of their main people lived there, and it's a great place to live. And it was dangerous too. I finally felt I needed to leave if I wanted to succeed in the world beyond the artist community. They accepted everything, and so I did. I left Bolinas, moved up to the Seattle area. Now I'm on San Juan Island.
Philip Hermans asks, what has been the most interactive animal that you have ever collaborated with?
I think it was the orcas. They were definitely interested in the music part of it. And these days, I sometimes will hum with some of the warblers and the finches that are around my house.
I was going to ask you if you'd worked with birds, because they
I'm not as much. My friend David Rothenberg, he's the master of working with nightingales in Europe, and he's taken it so much deeper than anything I've ever done. I've only done it. My main business was with whales, and I took it from every point of view. I mean, I was involved in it politically. I was involved in it environmentally and artistically.
Are you an environmental activist?
I was briefly an environmental activist and didn't like the tension of it and the aggressiveness of it, which I felt. And I
From the left or from the right?
From the environmental groups in Japan that I was working with. They were making lots of media, but it was only being seen in London and San Francisco and New York and Sydney. And the Japanese media pretty much blacked out everything that we ever did over there. So I stopped working there after I spent a couple of winters in a place where they were doing a dolphin drive fishery. And I didn't feel I was having much of an effect. But 12 or 15 years later, I started going back to Japan and doing tours there with groups that were trying to publicize friendly relationships with local dolphins and whales that were around the coast of Japan. So that was great fun and great. I think that was very positive work that I got involved in later on.
Do you have any hope for the future of the planet, the way things are going?
Not much, no. I worry about my granddaughter's future, you know, um, yeah, I don't know, I don't know where to go with that one. Um, I worry about where the world is going. I think that, you know, the rats are going to do fine. They're going to be around, and the ants are probably going to survive. But I don't know about the bigger stuff. You know, the whales are already disappearing.
That's for sure.
Yeah. How about you?
Uh, I'm I'm not optimistic either, but I was struck by how I'm able to look from my house in the East Bay across to Mount Tamalpais now and see it clearly now that we've gotten all the cars off the road for all these months of the pandemic. And maybe lessons are being learned here. Let's hope. But unless we have all countries collaborating together in a way that they don't seem willing to do, one country taking drastic action isn't going to be enough. It's
Yeah.
got to be everybody. And so
It's a species issue now more than a country issue, national issues. Are we going to recognize ourselves as a species? And maybe that's where the direction needs to go now.
during the course of this program, Jim, we've been looking at some drawings when your music is playing. I take it those are pen and ink drawings that you made. And could you describe the circumstances and the process?
Yeah, I've done expeditions all over the world, and when you're doing the kind of expeditions I was doing, waiting for whales to show up or wolves to show up, you spend a lot of time just sitting around a campfire. And I started doing pen and ink drawings a long time ago, and I developed a whole technique doing them, you know, an original technique like a lot of people do. And it started out just it being in a notebook, and then my wife one day said, you know, we should make some cards and see if they'd sell. So we made some cards, and they sold. And then postcards, it started with black and white postcards, and then somebody saw them and said, just like everything else that happened to me, I'd like to make greeting cards from them. And that was the next step. And then when Photoshop started happening, I started to get interested in that, and I took them, and the next thing I knew, I was printing them out as one-offs. I wasn't, you know, printing 50 of them, and I never thought of them as prints, you know, but more like printed one-offs. And I did that seriously for about 5 years, and I still do it to some extent. But what you're seeing now is some of the drawings that I made, some of them quite large. I mean, I make them 5 or 6 feet wide using specialized printers. I love doing it. It's fun work. And they're all species that I've worked with in some capacity or another.
Well, you know, nowadays, if people have a free moment, they pick up their portable phone and they scroll and read newspapers that were published around the world. There's no time to doodle.
I'm going to quote you on that one. There's no time to doodle.
It's
There is
sad.
time. There's always time to doodle.
Well, in case we can possibly pull it off, I'd like to offer on behalf of Other Minds to release something of yours as a digital download so that we can hear more of your interesting encounters with the sonic arts. Jim Nollman, who I take it is using his wife's computer because you've been identified as Katie the whole time. Thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure. And I just want to say how much I admire what you had done all these years and stuck with it, and grateful to have been a small part in getting you started. That's just amazing. You walk in and ask for a tape recorder to record some turkeys, and then you have a career Man, you've never worked a day in your life.
I beg your pardon.
It's our generation. Production of
Yeah.
this program was by Other Minds in San Francisco. My thanks to Jim Nollman for his participation and our excellent production crew, Mark Abramson, who created all of those slides and did a lot of video editing, Liam Erb, who has been at the controls with assistance from Blaine Todd. Thanks also to Barbara Bessie and the Earthways Foundation for encouraging us to do this series called The Nature of Music. This program will be archived on our website, otherminds.org, and I'd like to thank especially Brewster Kale and the Internet Archive for providing their collaboration and support so that our thousands of hours of music and radio programs from the KPFA archive and concerts that we've produced recently, both audio and video, will be visible and hearable by everybody for years to come. Thanks also to the David Brower Center, a nonprofit home in Berkeley for 18 organizations preserving the environment, and for co-sponsoring most of the programs in our series, The Nature of Music. You can go to otherminds.org to see and hear the others with such composers as Anea Lockwood, Bill Fontana, Cheryl Leonard, Alvin Curran, and Raven Chacon, to name just a few. I'm Charles Amirkhanian, Executive and Artistic Director of Other Minds, and I'd like to thank all of you so much for spending this time together.